Imagine you are sitting in a packed, overly warm convention hall in August 1980.
Oh, yeah. Standard convention weather.
Right. You've got a pencil, a handful of polyhedral dice, and your character is actively bleeding out.
Stressful.
Very. But you aren't just worried about surviving the next encounter. Every single point of damage you take is mathematically destroying your chances of winning a national tournament.
Yeah, it's a completely different mindset.
Exactly. Welcome to the day-in. Tabletop role-playing stopped being an aimless sandbox and became a highly coordinated SWAT raid.
That tension, between the wild imagination of players and the brutal mathematical constraints of a timed competition is, well, it's the exact crucible that forged modern game design.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a massive retrospective archival report on this flimsy 24-page softcover booklet published in 1980.
Right.
It's called A1, Slave Pits of the Undercity. And if you're listening to this, you likely already know the foundational lore of tabletop gaming. But we are looking at this not just as an adventure, but as a masterclass in how strict logistical limitations, specifically running a massive tournament, can completely rewrite the rules of an entire creative industry.
Because we are tracing a direct line from, essentially, a corporate math problem to the psychological warfare inflicted on players.
Yeah.
And it's all wrapped up in this gritty pulp fantasy aesthetic.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to look at the business reality of 1980.
Right, set the stage.
TSR, the scrappy company operating out of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, was rapidly transforming into a corporate behemoth. The core rulebooks for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons had just been finished.
It was a huge milestone.
Huge. The company was experiencing explosive, unprecedented growth.
And that fundamentally shifted the company's internal structure. Gary Gygax, the game's co-creator and primary creative engine, was increasingly being pulled out of the writer's chair.
He was busy with other things.
Exactly. He was pivoting into corporate management, brand expansion, and eventually trying to get the brand into Hollywood.
Leaving a massive creative vacuum at the exact moment demand was skyrocketing.
Right.
So a second generation of designers had to step up. Specifically, a former high school English teacher named David Zeb Cook was handed the reins to create A1.
Yeah.
And the document he delivered was a violent departure from the design philosophy of the 1970s.
Well, to understand that departure, we really have to look at the baseline expectation of the era. If you were playing prior to 1980, you were generally dealing with two distinct styles of design.
Okay, what were they?
First, you had the wide-open sandboxes, like the village of Hamlet. These were expansive, highly detailed environments with minimal overarching plot.
Right, they were essentially simulation tools.
Exactly. Designed to teach a game master how to manage a living, breathing ecosystem where players just, wandered around seeing what happened.
So they were highly reactive.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you had the Funhouse or Killer Dungeons.
Oh, like Tomb of Horrors.
Famously exemplified by Tomb of Horrors. Those were chaotic, sadistic obstacle courses designed solely to murder characters with completely illogical random traps.
Yeah, playing those older modules was like wandering around a chaotic theme park. You were just ambling from one disconnected, deadly ride to the next, kicking in doors.
Right.
But reading the archival report on A1, it doesn't feel like a theme park at all. It feels like a spec ops infiltration.
And that operational mindset is baked right into the setting. A1 places the players in the world of Greyhawk, specifically on this rugged, hostile peninsula known as the Palm Arch.
The narrative setup is incredibly stark.
It is. The coastal towns are being systematically devastated by marauders with yellow sails. They aren't just raiding for gold. They are orchestrating mass abductions of the human population.
Wow.
Yeah, the local economies have entirely collapsed and whole tracts of the coastline are left barren, populated only by packs of wild dogs.
Which means the local lords finally stop squabbling and pool their remaining resources to hire a surgical strike force.
Right.
The players. You aren't looters looking for a quick payout. You are elite operatives hired to dismantle a highly organized human trafficking ring based in the ruined city of Highport.
And Highport is a brilliant piece of world building. It isn't just a generic cave network.
No, not at all.
It is a fallen civilization. It features dwarven-engineered cargo cranes, switchback roads, and ruined infrastructure that has been repurposed by an occupying army of orcs, goblins, and human outcasts.
And your objective isn't just to kill everything that moves. It's highly specific.
Right, you have a mission.
Infiltrate the heavily fortified surface temple without raising a citywide alarm. Locate the hidden subterranean slave pits. Liberate the captives. Assassinate the leadership of the slaver cell to cripple their supply chain.
It's very tactical.
And if you try a full frontal assault, the module explicitly states you will be overwhelmed and captured.
Because the tone is noticeably darker and more pragmatic than the high fantasy Tolkien pastiches that dominated early tabletop gaming.
Right.
Zeb Cook actually cited his primary literary inspiration as Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian novella, Red Nails.
So they were pulling from the gritty, morally ambiguous pulp magazines of the 1930s.
Precisely. Red Nails features protagonists trapped in a decadent, enclosed, roofed city that is tearing itself apart through brutal factional warfare.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Cook translated that survival horror atmosphere into A1. The enemies you face, the intelligent human slave lords and their humanoid mercenaries behave like a military outfit.
Right.
They use squad tactics, they utilize the high ground, and they actively reinforce compromised positions.
It is a massive artistic leap forward, but the archival report reveals the ultimate irony here.
Oh, definitely.
This shift to a gritty, tactical narrative wasn't born out of some grand artistic manifesto. It was forced upon them by a terrifying logistical constraint.
Yep.
A1 was engineered specifically to be run at GenCon the 13th, the massive national gaming convention, in August 1980.
Running a massive convention tournament requires an incredibly controlled environment.
You have to imagine the chaos.
Exactly. You have dozens of different judges running hundreds of players through the exact same scenario simultaneously across different rooms.
Wow.
And if you want to declare a national champion, you need absolute, unassailable mathematical fairness.
Which brings us back to that sweaty convention hall. The scoring rubric included in the published module is a masterclass in behavioral conditioning.
It really is.
Teams were rewarded linearly for rapid momentum. Breaching new areas and bypassing encounters yielded points. It systematically punished the slow, cautious pixel hunting playstyle.
Yeah, where players check every single floorboard with a 10-foot pole.
Right, which older sandbox games actually encourage.
Yeah, but this fundamentally altered the psychology of the players. The tournament rules heavily penalized attrition.
How so?
Teams received negative points for every single hit point lost in combat and negative points for every spell expended.
That's brutal.
Even environmental damage had to be standardized, so a string of bad luck wouldn't ruin the competitive integrity.
Right.
If a player triggers an oil cart explosion, the judge doesn't roll a handful of dice to determine the severity.
Right.
The explosion deals exactly 11 points of damage, period.
Hold on, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Sure.
The whole appeal of these games, the reason they exploded in popularity, is the freedom to do whatever you want.
Yes.
If the system mathematically punishes you for fighting monsters or burning resources to explore, didn't they just invent a really stressful, rigid board game? It feels like they stripped the improvisational magic out of it entirely.
This raises an important question, and you've hit on a debate that RPG historians still argue about today.
Really?
Oh yeah, that strict tournament scoring undeniably created an illusion of choice. To achieve optimal play, you had to treat the dungeon as a hyper-efficient combat puzzle, rather than a living, breathing world.
You had to game the system.
Exactly. You actively avoided dialogue with non-player characters. You ran from fights if possible.
Yeah.
But it was that exact pressure for standardization that forced the invention of what is arguably the most important mechanical innovation in the history of role-playing games.
Boxed text.
Boxed text.
So they were effectively reverse engineering a narrative to fit a math problem, and they realized the game masters were the variable they couldn't control.
Exactly the issue. Before 1980, adventure text was just a chaotic jumble of informal notes.
The bullet points.
Basically, a room description might just say, 5 orcs, treasure chest hidden under the rug, watch out for the tripwire.
Oh, wow.
And the person running the game had to interpret that and improvise a description. But in a national tournament, human error is catastrophic.
Because if Judge A describes the room beautifully and subtly hints at the tripwire, but Judge B is tired and forgets to mention the tripwire entirely, Team B is unfairly penalized when they walk into it.
Precisely. To solve that, A1 introduced segregated, visually distinct blocks of text. The dungeon master was explicitly instructed to read these paragraphs aloud, verbatim, the moment players entered a room.
Interesting.
It guaranteed that every single table received the exact same atmospheric descriptions and the exact same critical clues.
It's the difference between jazz improvisation and playing in a symphony orchestra. Suddenly, everyone had to play from the exact same sheet music.
That's a great way to put it.
But the archival report notes that this completely shifted the pedagogy of the game. The person running it went from being an improvisational, conversational referee to a theatrical orator reciting a pre-written script.
And it changed the actual design of the encounters. Because the tournament rules financially punished players for engaging in straightforward combat, the challenges themselves had to evolve.
Right, because you can't just fight your way out.
Exactly. If you can't just throw a dragon at the players and let them roll dice until it dies, you have to find new ways to drain their resources.
You attack them psychologically, and you turn the architecture itself into a weapon.
Yes. The adventure is structurally divided into two distinct halves: the ruined temple on the surface and the subterranean sewers and slave pits.
Right.
The cartography for this underground network was drafted by David Diesel LaForce, and it represents a massive leap beyond the simple, flat geometric grids of the 1970s.
The maps are incredible. You see collapsed rubble, raised wooden walkways, crisscrossing over channels, specific sewage flow directions. It's a fully realized 3D space.
And that architectural verisimilitude was critical because it tied directly into the punishing environmental mechanics. A perfect example is the module's sewage combat penalties.
Oh, yeah.
If a player steps off a walkway and is forced to fight in the deep sewage channels, their movement is immediately restricted to 1/4 of normal speed, and they take a permanent penalty to their attack rolls.
It simulates how physically exhausting and thoroughly foul it is to literally wade through waist-deep muck while trying to swing a sword. Suddenly, a fundamentally weak enemy becomes terrifying simply because you are trapped in a terrible position. And the ecology of the enemies down there is fascinating. The module introduced the Aspis.
Right, the Aspis. They are a race of highly intelligent ant-like insectoids with a unique 3-stage life cycle: larva, drone, and cow.
Weird, but cool.
Very cool. And they are completely integrated into the dungeon's economy. The drones dual-wield weapons and utilize complex tactics, actually managing the trapdoors and security for the human slavers in a mutually beneficial relationship.
But the synergy goes even deeper. Up in the ruined temple gardens on the surface level, there is a massive ambulatory carnivorous plant called the giant sundew.
Right.
And it produces this incredibly sticky sap. The insectoid Aspis down in the sewers actually send harvesting parties to the surface to collect that sap, and then they use it to coat their tactical nets.
It's so smart.
It really is. If a player gets hit by an Aspis net, they take a severe penalty to their saving throws simply because of the sticky plant sap.
It's a brilliant, logical synergy between the flora and the fauna. And the traps deployed by the humanoid mercenaries are engineered with that same level of tactical pragmatism. You see this vividly with the oil cart trap.
The orcs have this mobile oil dispensing cart used to defend the hallways. If players try to use fire magic in the corridor and don't extinguish the flames, it triggers a massive explosion.
Right.
But what struck me in the report is that the module explicitly details the complex valves and nozzle adjustments on the cart itself.
Yeah, the level of detail is insane.
It's engineered deliberately so that clever players can't just steal the cart and use it as a makeshift siege engine against the rest of the dungeon without taking hours to study it. The game is actively anticipating player behavior and outsmarting them.
Which brings us to the most memorable and undeniably the cruelest psychological trick in the entire module: the deceptive slaves.
If you are listening to this, I want you to put yourself in this specific room. You are battered, your resources are low, and you finally kick open a door to find a group of seemingly helpless, shackled captives huddled in the corner.
Your natural heroic instinct is to rush in, drop your guard, and rescue them.
Obviously.
But they aren't captives. They are elite half-orc assassins and mercenaries who are feigning captivity to lure the strike team into a brutal, close-quarters ambush.
It completely shatters your complacency.
Completely.
It forces the players into the state of hyper-paranoia where you treat every subsequent discovery, every cry for help, with extreme suspicion. Does actively punishing the player for acting heroically create a toxic adversarial dynamic? Or is it a necessary narrative tool to establish the uncompromising grim reality of a slaver stronghold?
It was certainly effective at stripping away the safety net. But to ensure these brutal psychological traps and strict mathematical scoring rubrics actually functioned properly under tournament conditions, they had to be rigorously stress tested.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The playtest roster for A1 reads like a mythological gathering of the tabletop gods.
It really does. It was subjected to the collective scrutiny of the industry's founding fathers.
Right.
You had Gary Gygax and Brian Bloom, the founders of TSR, Frank Mentzer, who would soon write the definitive red box rule set that introduced millions to the hobby. Tom Moldvay, Jim Ward, and legendary illustrators like Jeff Dee and Errol Otis.
And Zeb Cook didn't let them bring their own characters. To control the variables, he provided 9 fully equipped, pre-generated characters. Each had a highly specific, necessary role.
Yep.
You needed the illusionist to blind groups of enemies. You absolutely needed the cleric's silence spell to maintain stealth during the infiltration.
Very specific tools for very specific problems.
Exactly. But the undisputed standout of the playtest was the pre-generated dwarf fighter, Elwita.
During the sessions, David Cook's wife, Helen Cook, took the role of Elwita, and she firmly championed the idea that Elwita should be a bearded female dwarf.
Which, in the lore debates of 1980, the physical characteristics of female dwarfs was a fiercely contested topic.
Oh, highly controversial at the table.
But David Cook approved the creative choice, and it was immortalized on the physical product. Jeff Dee painted this incredibly dynamic, comic book-inspired cover of the adventurers fighting the Aspis insects, and right there in the front is Elwita.
Heavily armored, fiercely defiant.
Rockin' a full, bushy red beard.
It's a wonderful piece of emergent storytelling. But once the GenCon tournament concluded, TSR faced a new problem.
What was that?
Running 5 disjointed, highly competitive tournament rounds at a casual home table was practically impossible for the average consumer. They had to figure out how to evolve A1 from a fragmented convention event into a cohesive commercial retail product.
That is the Marvel Cinematic Universe moment for tabletop gaming.
That's exactly what it is.
They accomplished it with what their archival report calls the Room 19 map patch. In the original tournament, the adventures didn't naturally flow into one another chronologically. So, for the commercial release, the editors literally inserted a physical narrative link into the sewer level. If players search Room 19, they find a crude, hand-drawn map detailing the slavers' hidden caravan routes.
And that single scrap of paper changed the industry. It physically and narratively linked the events of A1 to the subsequent module A2, Secret of the Slavers Stuck Here. It explicitly directed players out of the ruined city and pointed them southward toward the next adventure.
So instead of buying a standalone movie, you are buying into a serialized franchise.
Precisely.
That one patch effectively invented the concept of the adventure path or the super module, paving the way for the massive interconnected campaigns that dominated the 80s, 90s, and today.
What's fascinating here is that the physical product itself bore the scars of this rapid commercialization. Collectors today obsess over bizarre printing anomalies that reveal how fast TSR was trying to scale.
Yeah, the misprints are wild.
For example, the highly sought-after true first printing of A1 is identified by a mechanical printing error. Faint circular blemishes, colloquially known by collectors as phantom circles, appear superimposed over the interior illustrations on pages 10, 12, and 14.
Imagine paying a premium today just to secure a historical smudge on page 12.
Right.
But the second printing had an even more disruptive anomaly. The module came with an exterior folder that contained the maps. In a specific subset of the second printing, the interior of that folder was printed with the exact same high-gloss lamination as the exterior cover art.
Which was a functional disaster.
Because you can't write on it.
Exactly. Standard modules had matte interiors explicitly, so game masters could use them as workspaces, writing notes, tracking monster hit points, and marking trap locations in pencil.
Yeah.
The glossy anomaly ruined the folder because pencil simply wouldn't adhere to it. It highlights the disconnect between a rapidly expanding corporate printing process and the tactical, gritty reality of how the end user actually interacted with the game.
It's the friction of an art form becoming an industry. And speaking of things left behind by that industry, we have to mention what the report calls the ecological orphans.
Oh, the Aspis.
Right. We spent all this time discussing the brilliant 3-stage life cycle of the Aspis insectoids and their synergy with the giant sundew plant. They dominate the dungeon, they're the stars of the cover art, but they practically never show up again in the game's history.
It's kind of sad.
They just became forgotten relics, trapped forever in a 1980 sewer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they are a fascinating ecological time capsule. But their isolation doesn't diminish the macro-level impact of the module. A1 fundamentally proved that you could execute a gritty, cohesive, mission-based narrative with intelligent antagonists who actually reacted to the players.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom all the way out, Slave Pits of the Undercity is the definitive bridge in the history of tabletop design.
It really is.
It dragged the hobby out of the chaotic, aimless sandboxes of the 1970s and laid the foundation for the structured, narrative-heavy adventure paths that define modern play.
But it also serves as a historical warning. It proves that when you standardize a creative process, like imposing strict tournament rules to guarantee mathematical fairness, you unintentionally but permanently alter the very soul and format of the art form itself.
Right.
The invention of box text changed how the game was spoken, prepared, and experienced forever.
It really forces you to re-examine the systems we engage with every day, which leaves you with a final thought to ponder as you log off.
Yeah.
If the creators of A1 had to invent box text to standardize and control the wild imaginations of tabletop gamers in 1980, what invisible box text exists in the modern digital systems and open-world video games you interact with today?
That's a great point.
When you think you are freely exploring a digital landscape, are those rigid underlying algorithms actually there to help you play the game, or are they quietly and visibly scripting your every single move, just like a mathematically perfect SWAT raid?
That is a deeply unsettling but absolutely necessary question to ask.
Until next time, keep diving deep.